Should speech be regulated on the internet? In the world, a majority of people value their freedom of speech, and free expression in cyberspace is no exception to this. According to the Pew Research Center, majorities in 32 of 38 countries believe that allowing people to use the internet without government censorship is important, and in 20 countries, at least 80% hold this view. In many countries, young people, those with more years of education and high-income respondents, tend to place a higher value on internet freedom. Support for internet freedom is especially strong in Argentina, the US, Germany, and Spain, and Chile. While support for free speech and its place on the internet is common around the globe, it does not yet garner the same support as many other fundamental aspects of democracy, such as religious freedom and gender equality. However, as findings show, the internet is spreading across the globe as more and more countries gain access to advanced technology, and this may lead to an increase in the calls for freedom online, as countries in which a large share of the public reports using the internet also tend to have greater levels of support for internet freedom. This graphic illustrates how nations with higher internet usage tend to value internet freedom more. Americans have always cherished their freedom of speech, and yet, as more and more technological advances are made and communication via the internet is not only possible but readily available and anonymous in many forms, some people are beginning to question the value of freedom of speech, especially in regards to the online community. Finding harassment and hate speech online is not uncommon, and the lasting and harmful, sometimes even fatal results of these actions have prompted policy discussions. Unfortunately, it's not easy to craft laws or policies that will address those harms without inviting government or corporate censorship and invasions of privacy. Kayyali and Danny O'Brien explain online harassment very well when they say victims of harassment are bombarded by violent personalized imagery and numerous disturbing comments. Their addresses of their homes and workplaces may be publicized, along with threats of violence, and such online harassment can escalate to offline stalking, physical assault, and more. Therefore, these actions can be extremely destructive to the free speech and privacy rights of the victims. Some people believe that hate speech should be regulated on the internet, recognizing the platform's dangerous potential for recruiting, disseminating, and inciting hatred. They have acknowledged the tens of thousands of extremist websites and the effect that hate on the web has had on real crime. Although many claim they acknowledge the difficulty of balancing online hate legislation with internet freedom and freedom of expression, it seems as if they overlook this complex issue. In an article written by the Secretariat for the International Network Against Cyber Hate, or the NIACH, Ronald Eissens claims that in combating hate on the internet, we do not aim to hinder free speech, nor do we think that we will be able to change the hearts and minds of hate mongers. Rather, by using the various national and international hate speech legislation, we aim to curb the communication of hate speech. While this seems like a nice idea, broad terms such as various anti-hate speech legislation worry me as an American, as I truly value my freedom of expression and freedom of speech. I want to make it abundantly clear that I am by no means a hate monger, and I have no bad intentions, especially online where I know my actions are permanent. Still, I am unnerved at the idea of my natural-born fundamental rights being compromised, and I fear that any new legislation will lead to more and more legal action and continued pressures on my freedom of expression. Furthermore, many forms of abusive speech are already covered by existing law. However, we've seen that laws intended to prevent harassment are enforced unfairly and ineffectively, if at all. Oftentimes, law enforcement officers fail to acknowledge the gravity of online threats, which some believe suggests that stronger regulations should be established. These new regulations would include laws that broadly target speech, which reinforces my worries, as laws that don't carefully delineate between harassment and protected speech can end up snaring protection while failing to limit the behavior of the harassers. In this way, I believe that the most effective way to combat hate while still preserving our freedoms must be through action from bystanders. If these trolls who aim to hurt people in online communities are able to use the internet as a vigorous communication tool where they magnify and coordinate their attacks, those with good intentions should be able to speak up and challenge that bad behavior. In their article published by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Kayyali and Danny O'Brien call this counter-speech, which happens when supporters of targeted groups or individuals deploy that same communicative power of the net to call out, condemn, and organize against behavior that silences others. For those of you that are still confused, these authors explain the concept very nicely and simply, saying, just because the law sometimes allows a person to be a jerk doesn't mean that others in the community are required to be silent. We can and should stand up against harassment. Doing so is not censorship. It's being part of the fight for an inclusive and speech-supporting internet. Additionally, I agree with Eissens in that, in the end, the best protection against hate speech, which can be implemented everywhere no matter what, is education, teaching how information on the internet can be assessed for its validity and how to recognize the rhetoric of hate. Another potential limitation in the creative communities on the internet is copyright. People are often inspired by other thinkers, and every new creation is based on something that has been created in the past. As technology advances and the internet and media sources grow, the line between taking inspiration from and directly copying another source is one that is very important to identify. Copyrights are intended to protect works from being plagiarized and to encourage people to create new things. The idea behind this was initially to give authors dominion over their works so that they could generate income from it, and as stated in the Statute of Anne from 1710, for the encouragement of learned men to compose and write useful books. However, in today's digital age where consumers of information are now producers and sharers of content as well, the risks of copyright infringement are higher than ever. Casey Feisler explains this dynamic in his online article when he says, "Now anyone can be a publisher in seconds and distribute an unlimited number of flawless copies. This has of course led to piracy, but also to amateur content creation on a massive scale. Creativity through appropriation has become easier as well, with the digitization of nearly all media making manipulating it possible for anyone with common computer software. Consumers are not only producers, but also remixers." Thus far, lawmakers have addressed these concerns by strengthening the copyright and making it last longer and longer, yet creative works are often easy to find unlawfully. The video on copyright from our course Sci 110 suggests that creativity more than ever needs to be protected and encouraged, shared and enjoyed, which means that copyright needs to evolve to adjust to these rapid changes. In other words, copyright policies require updating as technological advances are made and new ways to consume and share information are created. Copyright policies, in some cases, may hinder creativity. If we follow outdated and ineffective copyright policies, there may be a chilling effect, as Feisler explains. A chilling effect, he says, occurs when you decide not to do something that you probably should be able to do for fear of legal sanctions. The primary root of this issue is that people do not know what is lawful and what constitutes piracy, which causes hesitation in online creative communities. The impact of this confusion is terribly unfortunate, as it often squanders great opportunities for education, culture, and art. This impossible balance of free speech and copyright, preventing piracy and protecting creativity, is one that requires massive thought and debate. But policymakers should perhaps keep in mind this chilling effect when enacting copyright policy, because stifling the people's freedom of expression is never something that America should practice. I very much agree with Guy Shapiro when he said in the Washington Times, "Keeping America's internet uncensored is vital to protect and perpetuate free speech." In this article, Shapiro mentions potentially the most significant aspect of free speech and an uncensored internet, which he says is the ability for people to hold their government accountable. Accordingly, authoritarian regimes do not allow criticism, and so they silence it by regulating speech. If we want to continue to prosper as a free and democratic nation, we can never allow this kinds of censorship. And this is the reason that new policy talks regarding regulating the internet spike my concerns. Thank you.